Well, there's a lot of people there that I've wondered about, and I just went ahead and wondered for me. I guess like the stat on ride sharing and drinking and driving.
1 million? Ready.
I'm doing great, how are you?
You think he had his best chance? No.
Hey, how's it going?
Still got 3 minutes. My chair doesn't bounce. No. Nope. Not gonna do it. My knee's been killing me. I don't know what I did to it. It fixes everything.
We make $1 million a year. How much do you spend to get an auditor? That's insane.
Next door, because they got grandkids. So I heard it.
I know you have to.
Yeah, but I don't, we used to go over there.
I think it kind of flows in with ours, right? It's not.
Ross,
It's just, they have to treat it separately.
there's no grandkids
Yeah.
in the other direction yet. No. You would know. They moved.
Yeah.
They
It's gonna be.
moved.
Where's this, title of the,
No, they're still
comp
there.
plan?
Yeah. Presuming one of them got out of jail.
You can stick around if you want.
I don't keep up with who's in jail or not in jail.
Drinking a beer. Longest minute ever.
I know. Tried to go for a run this weekend. Didn't go well.
Well,
Everybody ready?
yes.
Okay, I'm going to call to order the City of Oviedo Community Redevelopment Agency Governing Board meeting. It's Monday, April 18th at 5:30 PM. Is there going to be anyone in the audience that wants to speak to an item not on the agenda? Evidently, no. So the first thing we've got is approval of the minutes, February 21. Is there a motion?
I move we approve the minutes for February 21.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? I guess there were no comments. Okay, minutes are approved. Now we've got the financial statements and independent auditors report, and I'll ask in advance, we've got a few things on the agenda tonight, so let's move this along as quickly as we can. Jerry, is it you? Is it our, okay. Come on up. Hi.
There you go.
Better? Oh,
Better.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Mayor, and members of the CRA Board. Our auditors, Purvis and Gray, have completed the financial audit for the fiscal year ended September 30th of 2021. We did email out a PDF of the report, and you all should have received a hard copy of the report as well for review. I'm going to take just a few minutes to go over the report and the findings of, that occurred during the audit. So, financial statement components. So The front of the report is the auditor's report. They do have an unmodified opinion for the CRA, which means there was no audit findings. It was a clean report. Next is the management's discussion and analysis. This is a good place to go. It gives a general overview of the financial statements and the activities of the CRA. So just a really quick overview, go there and you can see what's included. Next, you'll have the financial statements, and then you'll have the notes to the financial statements. There's also a schedule of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance, which is going to show your budget to actual for the end of the year. Lastly, in the reports, you're going to have your other reports section, which is your reports on internal controls. It's your reports on compliance with Florida statutes for the CRA. You're also going to have a management letter, and we did have one management letter comment this year, and we'll talk about that at the end of the presentation. So the results for the CRA. So you can see the cash balances for the CRA have increased kind of significantly over the past few years. Most recently, the cash balance as of September 30th was $1.6 million. A lot of that is related to projects where funds were budgeted but just haven't been spent yet, which is primarily right now related to the Geneva Jive project. We did have an increase in cash over last year of about $640,000. Next is your CRA revenues and expenditures. You can see here, so the blue line is your revenues. You can see we had a pretty significant increase in revenues over the past few years, which is directly tied to the tax increment values. So as the growth in this area occurred, the value of the area occurred, you saw that increase in revenues. It has slowed down just slightly in the past 2 years, and that's just related to the growth in the area. So as stuff comes online more, you'll see more growth in that area. The revenues for 2021 ended at just over $1 million. Your expenditures ended just over $400,000. Again, the decrease in expenditures are related to the projects that just haven't encumbered any funds yet. The next slide is the CRA's fund balance. So the CRA ended the year with $1.57 million in fund balance. So Florida statutes does require that at the end of the fiscal year, any remaining fund balance either has to be returned to the taxing authority or it has to be encumbered to a specific project. So we did, subsequent to year end, once we knew the available fund balance, we did come forward with a budget amendment that did encumber those funds in the current year. So they now are encumbered to specific projects. Any questions? It's pretty straightforward. So the audit finding we had, so Florida statutes section 163-387-6B, it requires that during the year, the CRA board has to provide the adopted budget and any budget amendments to the county within 10 days of adoption, or 10 days of approval of budget amendment. This became effective in fiscal year 1920. It was brought to us last year at this time. So it was brought to us in March of 2021. And by the time we got the notice, we had missed providing it to them in October of 2021, or 2020, the beginning of that year. So we have responded to the management comment that was provided by Purvis and Gray. We have set up a process to make sure going forward, all of the budget amendments are provided to the county within 10 days. So we do send out emails and have record of those. So going forward, that shouldn't be an issue anymore. So any comments, any questions on the audit for the CRA?
Is the county cool with it?
County's fine. I don't
Okay.
even think they never respond to us. So, I mean, we send it because statute requires it, but no, they've never said, hey, you didn't send it. So, but we do. We send it now, so it's all good.
Thank you.
Matt Gano, he's the senior audit manager with Purvis and Gray. He has a quick presentation for you as well.
We'll start off by mentioning that management letter comment that it has had. We've had a lot of cities that received that comment. It is something new, but on top of that, ran into a few cities that when they reached out to the county wasn't aware that they were supposed to be receiving that as well. So it's something that just kind of got approved in the Florida statutes in 2019, and by the time it was being implemented, a lot of cities already started their budgets for their CRAs that year. So I'm just going to do a quick presentation because Kelly actually hit on a lot of the items that we would also be discussing. So we can go to the next page. So this is just showing you the leadership of the audit team. Myself, Matthew Gannot, Senior Audit Manager with Purvis Gray and Company. And I'm joined by the partner in charge, Ms. Helen Painter, as well. Mike Santrum is a IT director with our firm, and he actually assesses the internal controls over IT as it relates to financial reporting. He's not here tonight, but that kind of makes up your audit team leadership. Just a few of the items that we perform as part of our engagement. The main one that everybody knows about is the financial audit, in which we issue an opinion on the financial statements in our independent auditor's report, along with some other reports that are also issued as part of our audit engagement, internal controls affecting over financial reporting, which is a requirement by the rules of the Auditor General, as well as an examination report on CRA compliance with Florida statutes 163 as well as 218-415 related to investments. And I'll briefly touch on those a little bit later, and also the management letter, which is also required under the rules of the Auditor General. So the first thing, the auditor's report, the first thing is the independent auditor's report. As Kelly mentioned, it's a clean opinion this year. And our responsibility as auditors is to issue an opinion on the financial statements that they're fairly presented and no material misstatements based off our audit procedures that are performed. Management is responsible for the accounting and the financial presentation of those, and we do have a clean opinion, which is the highest level of assurance that can be offered as it relates to a financial audit. The internal controls over compliance and other financial matters is the other report that we also issue. Happy to mention that we have no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies related to the internal controls over the CRA's financial reporting. And here's two additional examination reports that are mentioned. The compliance with Florida Statute 163-387 is a separate report that's issued in the financial statements for the CRA in the back. We found no material misstatements related to the compliance with that Florida statute, as well as 218-415, which is pertaining to the investment compliance that the CRA has to abide by. And then the management letter is the last item that we mentioned. There's no major findings or deteriorating conditions. However, there is a management letter comment that we had that Kelly briefly touched on. I'm just going to kind of skip over this because I think Kelly kind of hit on the basics of all this stuff. So this just goes over the increase in the fund balance that y'all had, the decrease in expenditures, and the reason for those decrease in expenditures primarily this year is you had some projects that didn't actually get going yet. So your capital outlay that you had in the current year is less than it was in the prior year. Just one thing we need to mention, if there was anything that we came across during the course of our audit, if there was any disagreements with management or problems during the audit, y'all would be made aware of that. I am happy to announce that there are no such things that we have to report to you at this time. Management was very cooperative during the entire course of our audit of the CRA. And just a few audit matters to mention. The first thing is the budget compliance, which again, Kelly already mentioned that was basically that the budget needs to be remitted to the county within 10 days of adoption. Management's responded to that'll be addressed. The remaining fund balance, Kelly also touched on this, just the excess remaining fund balance. You have multiple options of what needs to be done with that. The city complied with this Florida statute by appropriating that excess fund balance to specific projects. In the capital assets, this is just an item that we had last year. Essentially, the capital assets that are purchased by the CRA are transferred over to the city for maintenance and ongoing of those assets, of those that were utilizing CRA funds. And we just had a comment that there should be an actual resolution or some sort of statute or something that's taken on by the board to actually transfer those assets over to the city to actually designate that occurred. And that's the end of that.
Anyone have any questions? Okay, we're moving on then, thank you, to fiscal year 2022-2023 CRA budget projections. Mr. Cobb?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're beginning the process for development of the FY 22-23 budget, doing it for the city as well as doing it for the CRA. What we like to do when we begin the preparation of the budget, we'd like to give you an idea where we are now and where we think we may be at the end of the year. And so Ms. Jones will come up and she's got another presentation for you just to walk you through where we are and where we think we'll be by year end.
So this is a similar presentation to that we present for the general fund in the budget process. It shows you, where you are now, where we project to be at the end of this current fiscal year and how that's going to roll into 22-23. So in the very far left column, it's the 2021 actuals. So these are the results of the audit that was just presented. And on the very bottom, you can see that our ending projected fund balance as of September 30th of 2021 was $1.57 million. Going into this current year, 21-22, if you go over to the amended budget, you can see that we have taken that money and we have rolled it into the budget for this current fiscal year. So this fiscal year is going to include all your new revenues, all your new tax revenues, along with that $1.57 million that's been allocated to the projects in the current year. Most of that did go towards the Geneva Drive realignment project. So what we've anticipated going into 22-23 is we anticipate everything right now is going to be spent in the current year, which it likely won't, and if it doesn't, we will carry that forward into the next budget year as well. But starting with 22-23, we've taken the taxable values that we have from the property appraiser, the last update we've gotten, and right now we've increased them by about 4%. We know inflation is significantly high, so we know the minimum on at least residential will be 3%. The CRA sometimes comes in higher than the rest of the city, but right now we're just being conservative and we're budgeting that at 4%. So the 1.07 million would be the revenues both from the city and from the county as well. Going down into expenditures, professional services, so those are the services provided by John Jones when he was the director of the CRA. We have left that in there just for now for discussion to look at the cost of the city performing those services for the CRA now. The next line is $5,000. That's the fee for the audit that is required to be performed by the CRA. Going down a little further, the 175, that's a report that we are required to file with the Department of Economic Opportunity. We've paid for it every year. We've never put it in the budget. So we're just including it in there for this upcoming year. We have carried forward the same amount for the private grants, which right now includes $30,000 for the facade grant and $25,000 for the support of public arts. The $910,000, that is sort of what we're left with at the end here. So we've put in, the administration and the audit, and we've put in a lot of the smaller fees that we know about. The 910 is what's available. So that is really up to the discretion of the board. We have right now just sort of said a possibility would be Franklin Street. We know that's in a design phase, and at some point the construction will come about. So that 910 could be allocated towards Franklin Street or any other project that the board sees fit for this upcoming budget year. The transfers out, so in past years, we have allocated the debt related to Oviedo on the Park. It was a transfer from the CRA over to the city. We did eliminate that transfer this year. All we left is the $10,000 that was typically transferred for the financial support services. With the payoff of all the debt on the general funds, and we pay down on that debt, we did eliminate the need for that transfer. So we did remove that. And then we have a slight balance of $52,000 in contingency. Again, that will need to be allocated somewhere. But this is just a start to sort of show you where we're at in anything the board is interested in for next fiscal year. But this is a start to help you budget for the next year. So any questions on the budget?
Anyone?
You know I'm happy. I've been fighting that for 3 years.
Well, there you go. So no more Oviedo on the Park debt service.
Right.
Okay, so it looks like based on our scheduling, we could start discussing at our next meetings what we might want to do with that capital
Absolutely.
fund.
Right.
And our budget meeting is Monday, August 1st, according to this schedule in front of us. Is that right, Mr. Cobb?
It'll probably be August 15th.
Okay, so this schedule's probably going to change.
It will.
Okay. All right, anyone got any more questions on the budget item? Okay.
Oh, really fast here, I forgot to mention. The city is in discussions with the fire district. I know that's going back and forth. There's also been discussions on the millage. Just know that any change that the city were to make regarding millage would have an impact on the CRA as well. So just so that's
So
aware.
on this chart you gave us, you projected a possible quarter mil reduction?
That's just a number that had been mentioned.
Right.
That's not, that was just hypothetically, if that were to take place, that would be the impact to the CRA.
So
If it's-
each quarter mil is roughly 54,000 in
Right.
reduction in revenue?
Right, to the CRA,
Okay.
right.
Everyone
then-
understand that? All right.
Okay.
Anything else?
That's all I have for today.
Thank you
Just
so
one-
much.
okay, you're welcome.
Appreciate it. Okay, our next item is, we had asked at one of our prior meetings to get a presentation of possible connections to the Solari Park sidewalks and walkway from the new connector street. Mr. Cobb.
Actually, Mr. Wyatt's going to make the presentation.
Mr. Axel, I promise this will be quick. Members of the CRA Board, good evening.
We seem to be doing well on time.
At your March 7th CRA meeting, it was, as Mr. Axel mentioned, it was talked about creating, as you see in the graphic above, a pedestrian connection from the proposed connector road to Solari Park. As you see in the graphic, as it's proposed, is basically why it's there is because it's the closest point between two lines. And where it's shown, the connection into the park is basically widened out on the boardwalk. It's about 10 foot wide right there. So if we connected with a wide section from the roadway, you could run a bike through there quite easily and make the curves without, slowing down. One thing to note about the location as it's proposed and why it's kind of shown at an angle like that is because one thing to know is based on the as-built elevation of the boardwalk within Solari Park and where the road is proposed to be. Because what most people don't realize is as you go from Geneva Drive down towards the park, it comes down significantly. And it's about a 5-foot elevation difference between where the boardwalk is in the park to where the road's going to be. Actually,
Which one's higher?
the road is higher by 5 feet, believe it or not. So it's kind of deceptive, but that's why it's shown angled like that, because we have to have a 2% slope. We can't just send them straight downhill because you launch someone into the lake. We don't want that. So we have to kind of make it kind of like almost like a switchback a little bit to kind of bring that slope down. That's why it's proposed there. I haven't really done anything beyond this graphic. I have talked to a consultant about moving forward on this to get design numbers, should that be the will of the CRA board tonight. One thing to note, based on where we've got it proposed here, is we're not looking at a bridge, we're looking at a boardwalk. We could basically build a boardwalk extension from the road over to the park. So two things, cheaper to design, cheaper to build. So that's an advantage as well, probably faster too on lead time.
Is it a wooden boardwalk or is it?
It would be the same
composite?
material that's out there right now. We just cut into that section that goes across the creek where it kind of bends in the S-curve and connect it right there. Be like a T tie-in, and so you'd have no trouble accessing.
Okay,
Be kind of flared out, I think, at the connections.
all right. I was
So-
just thinking of maintenance on it. So if it's fairly maintenance-free.
I'd rather have the boardwalk than the bridge in the long
Right.
run,
Right.
easier.
Anyone else have questions for Mr. Wyatt? I've got just one. So what's the design status of the connector road, and is this something that should wait for that to kind of settle down?
The design point of the connector road, it's at 60% right now. It hasn't really advanced beyond the update that you had back in March. I do have plans. We've started reviewing them, but I would prefer to have the roadway designed, completed, the roadway design complete before we actually finalize the connection for the pedestrian crossing. We can start it when the design's done, but I'd rather wait until it's done because it'll just change.
So this is something we can get constructed in the same time frame, but defer design for now?
If we get the design done in time, we could just combine it as one bid and do it all at once, potentially. It won't take long to design the boardwalk, the connection, the pedestrian crossing.
Okay, thank you, Mr. White. Anyone else have questions on that? Thank you very
Thank you.
much. All right, our next item is.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
do I have consensus to move forward in getting cost estimates on the design?
Did you want to wait on that,
I
Mr.
guess,
Wyatt?
as long as everyone's okay with the point of where I'm showing the crossing, and I apologize because I meant to ask that question and make sure everybody was okay with it. If we're good to go with that location, that closest point, if consensus would allow me just to move forward to go ahead and get design going. But I'll have to, but understand, I have to come back to the CRA to get approval on a design scope.
Everyone fine with that?
Absolutely.
Okay, looks like you have consensus.
Thank you.
Is that in any way backwards? Like if you get a bid, we're talking about only design, but the design won't change based on the road?
No,
Well, I want to get to, as long as the road gets to
Oh,
like.
quote for design,
a
not the
quote for
actual.
desi-
Okay.
No, we
okay.
won't, I can't start design until I
Until
actually
you
come
have
back and
the
get
other-
approval
Okay,
for purchase, so.
thank you.
Any ROM on what you think it's going to cost, design cost?
20, 30 grand at the most.
All right.
Yeah, it's not, I don't think it'll be, we're not talking a whole big distance here. Of course, I could be wrong.
When do we think we're going to have that design done for the road? Do you have an estimate on that?
It's at 60% now, probably beyond 60%. I threw a curveball at him the other day, based on a whole nother tangent, which I won't go into, about the lift station. It should be completed July, if I had to guess, on the roadway. So it's a matter of sequencing logistics as far as when it can be constructed.
So perhaps we can get an update, unless Mr. Cobb changes our meeting date, July 18th, to understand where those things are.
Yep,
Okay,
wouldn't be a problem.
thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, the last item we have is the only one we need official action on, proposed amendments to the CRA bylaws. Mr. Cobb.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, I don't need formal, the only thing I'll need tonight is whether you want me to bring you back a resolution for.
Okay, so we
for
don't
formal
have,
action.
we don't have action tonight?
No, you didn't. I
Okay,
wanted
if you
to,
can go ahead and explain what you've prepared.
that's great, thank you. And Madeline, I'm sorry, Elion, if we could, you just pull up the proposed amendments. What we brought for you tonight is some proposed amendments to your bylaws. And we got to looking through them, and they haven't been really looked at since they were adopted. And so we wanted to bring forward bylaws that were more up to date, that reflected what we are, our current operations. We cleaned up some references to the CRA and the CRA governing board. We also looked at the role of the city clerk, and we cleaned that up to make sure that, to show what the city clerk does. We cleaned up the role of the administration with the city manager serving as executive director. We took and moved public meetings to the front part of Section 4, so it's clear that all meetings are conducted per state statute. They're public meetings conducted per state statute. We made a revision to the chair and vice chair. Right now, your chair and vice chair are elected by the city council at a city council meeting. And we just feel like that the board is now operating as a board, and so we felt like it would be best to have the chair and the vice chair elected by the board as a whole at a board meeting. And so we're recommending that we do that as well. There was a thing in there about the agenda and the preparation of the agenda, and I can tell you that I do not believe Mr. Jones ever followed that once. We have a workflow system that we use to prepare your agendas now. We're getting them to you a week ahead of the meeting. And so we felt like it would be best to remove that section altogether. And there's also, we made a revision to the, your rules of order to follow the same rules that the city council follows. And lastly, we're proposing to revise the bylaws to allow you to be able to amend them with a majority vote. Right now, it requires 5 votes to do it. And I spoke with Mr. Hall before the meeting, and one of the things that I questioned about the way your bylaws were established was that it had a 2010 version of Florida statute. It had an unsigned version of your delegation of authority resolution from the county, and it had an unsigned version of the 2008 resolution City Council adopted to create the CRA. And I asked Mr. Hall, I said, is this really necessary? And he looked over it, and he felt like the way that we've made the references to them in the body of the bylaws, that we no longer need to include them. So that is one of the things I will recommend, is that we delete those attachments. We have the signed copies of the delegation of authority resolution. We have the signed copies of all the resolutions that have been adopted regarding the CRA, as well as the ordinance that created the trust fund. So I don't think we really need to include them as part of your bylaws. So I would recommend that we go ahead and delete those as well. Those are basically what we tried to do with these revisions. I really just wanted consensus from you tonight to move forward and bring you an actual resolution adopting these revisions. But if you feel like you need to take another meeting to give me direction on any of the proposed changes, that's fine. If you feel like that we've covered it comprehensively enough to warrant bringing it forward for formal action, we can do that as well. And so I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Does anyone have a problem with Mr. Cobb bringing this back to our next meeting for action? Any questions or comments for Mr. Cobb? Bring it back?
Could do that.
Okay. Well, that's the end of our items. Does anyone have anything to add before we adjourn? Hearing nothing, we are adjourned.
Future meeting dates?
Future meeting dates, sorry, sir. Mr. Cobb said they're all going to change, but June 6th, July 13th, August 1, September 8th.
Well, Mr. Axel, if you look up on the screen, those are
That's
the
the
dates
new
I
ones?
recommend.
Well, I'm not going to read it.
Basically, what it is that Mr. Jones, before he left, had you scheduled for the first Monday of every month. And what we've encountered is that we have a hard time finding the agenda items ready for you by the first meeting of the month. But however, we're having good success on the second meeting of the month. And rather than rescheduling you, it would be best just to go ahead and schedule for the second meeting of the month. However, in the month of August, September, we will have to do it on the first meeting to adopt your budget, as well as in November and December, because there's a possibility we will not have a meeting on the third Monday in November and December. So those dates we may have to shift over to the first meeting of the month. And one of the things about your bylaws is that it does require you to meet at least quarterly. So if we miss a month here and there, we will not be violating anything.
Okay. We are adjourned. Anything else, Bob, before I say that again?
No, I think we're good.
Good? All right, thank you.
Like to get along.
So this is a utility representation. This is 419,
Okay.
Academy, this is Stevens, and green right here is a force main. This dashed green line over here is a gravity main. These two stars are
That's where he's
Mr.
at.
Nasser's property. He wants to just come across the street and connect in this manhole. He's got this quote for
But
what's
he
called...
can't because that's gravity.
Correct. He's got a quote for directional drilling, and you can do it. You can directional drill a line and get in there. Fine,
it's
so
not
be
gonna
it.
flow.
But he's got to go through the county. But he needs to get an engineer. And this is one of those.
Can he go over here? Like he could go
He
out
could come.
and down.
He could come
if he
here
wanted to?
with a little lift station, but he's got 2 units, and so it's like